And thank you for joining us here on PM Express. And tonight we are again looking at the budget from the point of view of the minority side. And as you know, tomorrow the debate on the 2025 budget will begin in the House. Last week, Thursday, he addressed a news conference on behalf of the minority. He is the immediate past finance minister. Last week we had the finance minister himself, the current one, on the show. So we're going to be interrogating a few things that they've been saying about the budget, doing a fair bit of fact-checking too here on the show, and a host of the things they've said we'll be interrogating. One of them, as you know, that they're claiming that the NDC manipulated the data in the budget to paint a grim picture. They also talk about the fact that this may affect our review by the IMF in this next review that may happen. And they also, I'm pretty sure you had the minority leader on the floor say that the 24-hour economy policy was unfunded. What's the big deal there? A policy the minister says will come. We'll ask that question. And the no clear plan to empower the private sector. Is that really the case? We'll look at that too. Setting a low fiscal target so they can meet it and brag is what the MPP has been saying. We'll check that too. All that here on PMX. But fundamentally, I'm curious to get Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam's take on that revelation in the budget about the tax refund account. He will give us an explanation as to what happened to that particular fund, as the world was told last week by how that fund was turned into a slush fund and dissipated. Some 16 billion could not be accounted for or used for purposes that the law doesn't specify, as in misapplied. We'll get clarity on all that. But also, he's been raising questions about the underfunding of government priority areas, right? What does the evidence say as against what the finance ministry had actually budgeted for and what the appropriation is? All that here on PMX, so stay with us. And thank you very much for joining us here on PMXS. My guest joining me in the studio is Mohammed Amin Adam. He is the immediate past finance minister. And tomorrow, the budget debate is going to start. And he obviously is going to be a key voice. He's a man who was there a short few months back. And so we would hear his thoughts on the budget. Last week, he presented the minority position on the budget. We're going to be interrogating many of the things that he said at that particular press conference. PMX is always brought to you by Syntax Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. It is also brought to you by Academic Times newspaper. And I always recommend that to you. And also, Pepsodent Cavity Fighter toothpaste are all recommended. And Ghana, let's talk water tanks. You know the secret to real water storage. It's simple. If your tank doesn't have the tortoise on it, then it is not the correct tank. That's the right and tank to use. Is the champion of water tanks. It is strong, it is durable, and built to handle Ghanaian weather, rain or shine. Syntax Tank provides you the very best alternative to storage of water. And my guest is with me in the studio. And you're looking forward to tomorrow's debate?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it with so much optimism that our side will, as usual, have our say. Mm-hmm. They say the opposition have their say, and the majority, the minority have our say.
And I wonder what really is the point of the debating the budget? Because
well, I think that
it will be approved either way.
Well, I think it has even changed.
Under the new standing orders.
Under the new standing orders, it's commentary we are going to make. We are going to comment on it. It's really not a debate, because you don't debate on a statement. Yeah. And because the budget statement was a statement as per our standing orders. So you are not going to see the usual, rancor and tension associated with debate, because we are going to make comments. Yeah. Well, but it's anybody's guess. We'll wait and see how it turns out. But we are ready. The minority is ready. We see this as a very important exercise, not because the majority doesn't have the numbers to pass the budget, but because we think that we have experience and we have learned lessons, and it is important we share for the benefit of our country. This is why this country needs a strong opposition.
And you think you are that? You are ready to offer that?
We are ready to do that.
Let's get into the specifics. There's a lot to get through tonight, so let's get straight to it. Last week in the budget, the finance minister dropped the bombshell. The tax refund account, he says, was turned into a slush fund, was pillaged by your ministry. And that over 8 years, you accumulated 29.11 billion cedis. You only spent 12 billion of that. 16 billion that was left was misapplied. Guilty as charged?
Well, I don't know what the minister wanted to say, because the tax refund account, the revenue in it is part of government revenue. Right, it's part of government. It's always been part of government revenue collected by the Ghana Revenue Authority, except that 6% of that revenue is set aside, not because it will not be spent. It's set aside to pay tax refunds. And to the extent that part of it is not used for tax refunds, the law allows that to be used as regular revenue of the government. And you know that, as we say often, money is tangible, fungible, right?
Yeah.
You move money around from different accounts because it's a pool. We are running a single treasury account system, right? So irrespective of what the account name is, you know, the Controller General can fall on it when the need arises. And so 6% of the government revenue is set aside so that they can refund applications for tax refund. But any part of that which is not used for tax refund is used, you know, like we do regularly with government budget.
But there's a legislation that governs the use of that fund.
Yes, but the legislation that allows.
If you don't use it, it has to return to the consolidated fund.
But the consolidated fund is what I'm talking about. You have to spend it. And so I don't know what it means by that. If it's been spent, it says 16 billion has been spent.
What did you spend
it on? Was it spent through the consolidated fund or not?
Do you spend it to the consolidated fund?
Well, I'm waiting for them to come out with what they think we have spent it on. I was not able to.
He was categorical that you did not spend it in the consolidated fund. You spent it for something else other than what it was meant for and specified under the law.
Well, I don't know. I'm waiting to see which areas he will say.
So he mentioned one.
You know,
he mentioned one. Paying contracts. Contracts.
For what?
That has been awarded by the state.
Yes.
SML, he says, for example, use part of that to also pay XML.
Yes.
The law doesn't specify that.
But what is the consolidated fund used for? The consolidated fund is used to pay for the execution of contracts. All the projects that are being done across the country are done through contracts. And when the contracts are executed, they are paid for. The road contracts, services contracts, etc., etc. And so if the law allows a part of the tax refund, which has not been used for tax refund, to be used through the consolidated fund, that's exactly what the government did. And so I'm really surprised why he said so, even to suggest that he's making savings out of that in order to, you know, somehow cover up for the revenue losses from the scrapping of some taxes. There is no savings here because
I guess
it is already part of government revenue. Except that we were doing 6% as per the law. He's asking that they will do 4%, and therefore he's asking for the law to be changed. The 2% was already part of government revenue. It is not new revenue that will come in.
There's clear legislation that governs the tax refund, and it was under his and Setekwe's watch that this was introduced. And he's very clear that the legislation governing this doesn't allow you to use it the way you used it, as in the excess must be lodged back into the consolidated account. The key question then becomes, did you lodge it back into the consolidated account?
I don't know the details because the Controller and Accountant General does all these things. It is not the Minister of Finance who will go deciding what goes into what accounts, you know. It is the Controller General who does that. And the Controller General runs a single treasury account system. And so if you have 10 accounts, right, and the Controller and Accountant General wants money to pay for a service that has been provided or a contract that has been executed, you will see them move money around.
But
I'm sure you have also heard of what we call sweeping. And this current government, they did some sweeping
So
when they came into government.
So you're saying the Controller General General went into the tax refund account and used a 16 billion unused amount to pay?
No, I don't think you are getting
government
me.
arrears.
I'm saying that the law requires that 6% of government revenue, total tax revenue, be set aside. But to the extent that there is a part that has not been used. And so if you estimate, if you project that the quantum of tax refunds application that will come will be about 200 million Ghana cedis. And yet the 6% you set aside is 500 million Ghana cedis. It's reasonable to say that the balance of 300 million Ghana cedis will be spent through the consolidated fund. Right? And that is what you will do. Why will you use it for other purposes other than for what they are meant for? Government projects, government contracts.
What did you use it for?
I don't know. I have to wait for them to tell us what we used it for.
Because, but you were there as finance minister, so you must know.
As minister, several contracts come through you, and so I'm not able to sit here and say we used it for this. But
were you aware
and let me also add that because we run a single treasury account and money is fungible, I am not able to know in my office how the controller moves money around to be able to pay for services.
Were you aware
or
at the time
executed.
When you were there that you had that amount of money in the tax refund account that is unused for the purpose it was set up to refund?
I'm sure he's talking about several years of the administration of the tax refund. And I'm taking time to explain to you how the tax refund
I understand
works.
that. I'm just checking whether you were you aware at the time you were there as finance. You were there briefly.
Yeah.
You were deputy first and then subsequently. Were you aware that that amount of money was in the tax refund account that could be used or was being used?
No. What I know is that, for a fiscal year, there is a budget. The budget estimates what to be the revenue, total government revenue, and what the 6% would be. In fact, even when the GRA has to use it for tax refunds, they apply to the minister. The minister approves for them to use it. But you as minister cannot even every day be checking how much is in it, how much is left. That is not the work of the minister. It's not the work of the minister.
To back...
But once there is a legitimate transaction and you approve for payment to be done, then controller has to then come in. Controller has more than 100 accounts, right? And I just told you he manages a single treasury account, which means that all the accounts are treated as one. Except that on paper, he will know this amount is due this purpose, that amount is due that purpose. But he moves money around. And so if I approve transaction, I'm not able to know how the controller is able to move money around to be able to pay. Right. And so I'm surprised why the minister will come trying to do
the finance
politics with tax refund.
To back the finance minister's position on this, one of the charges against Ken Ofori-Atta by the Office of the Special Prosecutor is, quote, payment out of and utilization of the tax refund account of the Ghana Revenue Authority. So he's actually being probed for the use or, in this case, alleged misuse of that account.
Well, but this is being investigated, the subject of investigation by OSP. So I'm even surprised why we are discussing it. Yeah. So why don't we be cautious about this in order not to prejudice the investigation? But what I'm trying to do is to explain to you how the tax refund account works and how the system of payment works. We are running a single treasury account. And so if you go there, you may not even know what is in the tax refund account unless the controller shows you a paper, right, that this amount is due tax refund account, this amount is due the oil fund account, that amount. But it's fungible and they move around. And the law allows him that to the extent that part of the money set aside for tax refund has not been used for tax refund, they can be spent as regular spending by government through the consolidated fund.
Substantively.
Unless you want to tell me that the consolidated fund is specific for some contracts and cannot be used for other contracts. If you say that, then we can debate it.
So substantively,
but I don't know about that.
The finance minister's objective for touching on the tax refund account is to bridge and plug the hole that will be left.
Yes.
Because of the abolition of the taxes that they had to take away. It's part of their manifesto promise. And so the savings from there, as in the reduction, or whatever it is that they're getting, is what we're going to be used to plug it. What's your take on that approach?
Is there a saving in a way?
Because if you have 6%
yes.
and reduce it to 4%,
yes.
having studied it over 8 years, and you realize that over 8 years you only spent, what, 12 billion,
yes.
you have 16 billion,
yes.
then you can actually reduce it and still have enough to refund.
And then
the rest is what you use to bridge that gap.
It's no savings. It is already part of government revenue.
Yeah.
When they collect the entire revenue, the 6% that is set aside is for tax refund. But if it is not used for that purpose, it is within the pot already. So there is no savings. So if you have observed that over the years, as you rightly said, you've been using the equivalent of 4%, right? And then the remaining 2% usually will go through the consolidated fund for the minister, for the government to use. How can you turn around and say that that 2% is saving? It's not saving. It's already part of the government revenue. So I was lost, really, when I heard him say that he's made savings of 3.8 billion Ghana cedis as a result of reducing the tax refund from 6% to 4%. There is nothing like saving. It's already part of the pot. So, Evans, you can,
but it
unless
is,
you explain to me why
the substantive matter, though, is he's managed to alleviate
yes.
part of the tax burden on Ghanaians,
in terms of
scrapped some taxes,
yes.
and then found money elsewhere that you say was already in the pot
yes.
to bridge that gap that has been left because of the cancellation. That definitely is smart policy.
No, I don't see it that way. I mean, every government, depending on the times, can bring in a tax or can scrap a tax. This is not the first time taxes have been scrapped in this country. In 2017, we scrapped about 17 different taxes, right? And so the times will dictate when you scrap taxes, when you bring in new taxes. The new taxes that we brought in, which he has decided to scrap, were brought in at a time we were in difficulty. And we all understand why the COVID levy was introduced, et cetera, in order to generate more revenue. Because we're borrowing and borrowing to fund the COVID expenditure. We borrowed to fund the banking cleanup exercise, and therefore you needed some additional revenue. And so when things are tough and you bring in taxes, it is also reasonable that when things are, the pressure is gone down, the hardships are reduced somehow, then you take off.
So you agree with the cancellation of those taxes?
No, we don't have any problem with that. But let me also add that it is not as if he has just scrapped taxes. Some of the taxes were actually not being collected. The emission tax was not being collected. I'm sure you know that. The tax on lotto winning was not being collected.
You on record to have said that the betting tax,
yes,
you did not collect that.
I'll come to that.
Because you just taxed on taxes,
yes,
we have to address that immediately.
I'll come to that. But I'm saying that some of them were not being collected. So what do you mean by scrapping what was not being collected? And in addition to this, he has also introduced new taxes.
We'll come to the new taxes because that's very fundamental,
so
including the one on the mining.
Because you want to reduce the impact of consumers, and then you introduce new taxes. New taxes may be affecting companies, but the companies will pass this on to...
Not exactly. We'll come to that. I think that's a very important point.
Yes.
Let's deal with the taxes. What you said at the press conference, I believe, and to quote you, betting tax that they said they have abolished.
Yes.
We never collected betting tax. So to come and tell Ghanaians that you have abolished something that you have not implemented is to deceive the people of Ghana. Okay. Then you go to the GRA, 2023, and this is the withholding tax of winnings, into bracket, betting tax, 51.3 million. 2024, 147.76 million, a total of 199 million cedis collected.
Yeah.
You agree that you erred when you made this pronouncement?
No, I did not err. What you just read, my words, you said that the betting tax that they say they have abolished, the betting tax that, qualify the word that, because the minister came to Parliament and said he's going to abolish, right, withholding tax on winnings from lottery, otherwise known as betting tax. Right? Winnings from lottery, otherwise known as betting tax, as if to equate betting tax to winnings from lottery. Meanwhile, in their manifesto, they said they were going to abolish the 10% withholding tax on bet winnings.
Yes, which is what we call it. We've been calling the betting tax.
No, there is win. No,
so there's a tax on winnings.
When you
tax
lotto,
on winnings.
Yes, and you win. There is tax on it.
Yes, that's what they said to abolish.
And that's what I'm saying, that it wasn't implemented. And the minister came to Parliament and said that that tax, otherwise known as betting tax. So my point was that what he's calling betting tax, that tax he's calling betting tax, has not been collected. We never implemented that.
So which tax did you collect? Which tax that the GRA...
The tax on bet winnings. And that was why the minister was gracious enough to come back to Parliament and correct himself. He came back to Parliament and said they promised to withdraw or to abolish taxes on bet winnings. And that is what he was laying the bill in Parliament to do.
So to be clear,
yes,
on the withholding tax on winnings, you implemented that?
The withholding tax on winnings for betting was implemented.
Was implemented. Okay.
But the withholding tax on winnings from Lotto
was not implemented. So
when Parliament and say winnings, from Lotto, and I know that it wasn't implemented, and then you call that betting tax. I was challenging him. That is why I said that the betting tax that they say they have abolished, which is that betting tax. The winning from Lotto, which he referred to as betting tax, was not collected. And that is a fact. And I know for a fact, because I chaired meetings to discuss how to implement it, following petitions from National Lottery Authority. And so if the minister has come back to correct it, to say he meant winnings from bet winnings, then I'm wondering why he was not specific in the first place.
So to be clear, and this is important, but the tax on Lotto was not implemented. The withholding tax on winnings.
Bet winnings.
Yes. When you bet, you win. There is a tax on your winnings.
Yes, there's a tax on it.
That you implemented.
That was collected.
Okay.
But when I said this, people didn't really,
But that's the amount that is the tax that everybody who stakes calls the betting tax.
Yes,
and that's why people were very upset with you when you make the point.
That is why I was confused, to be frank with you, why the minister will not call that betting tax and rather come to call winning from Lotto betting tax. And so at first I thought maybe he didn't want to deliver on that promise, because the promise in their manifesto was that they were going to abolish winning from tax on bet winnings.
But they've kept that promise.
And then you came to Parliament and you are talking about Lotto win and calling it betting tax, rather than wins on bet winning, rather than tax on bet winnings. And so...
Let's quickly get to the allocations that were made for the priority areas. Now, one of the ingenious things that they did is undo a few things to free money. On cap, get fund, free money, take care of free SHS, take care of free tertiary education, first year, and take care of the free sanitary pass, etc. You say, and you've sent some evidence to suggest that although they made those budget they projected and made provision for in the budget. When they came with the appropriation, they were under appropriated.
Exactly
leaving
so.
A gap.
Exactly so.
Right.
But before then, I even talk about that. When you uncap, get fund to fund free senior high school, what is novelty about that?
Well, they've uncapped something that everybody says uncap.
Because
that would free more money.
Senior high school with the goods and services component of ABFA.
Yes.
That's what we're using to fund it.
They're using that for something else now.
So if you've come and you are using it for something else, and then you uncap get fund for the same purpose of funding free senior high school, what have you done?
I guess the question is, when you capped it, what were you using that money for? It
was in the consolidated fund.
Yes. So they have decided to change that policy.
So it's just a
make more money available for that, and it's dedicated there. And they said they're going to save more than $4 billion. Unless
you are saying that the goods and services component of ABF we were using for free senior high school was inadequate. But if it is capping the GET fund, which will make more money available to you, such that you can still fund senior high school, what new thing have you done? You have merely changed the funding, route, if you like. The funding approach is what you have changed, but you haven't done anything.
What they've done there is a dedicated source of funding.
But the goods and services component of ABFA was a dedicated source of funding.
In the, say, 6 years you implemented,
yes,
had it always come from
it was a dedicated
revenues.
source, same as the Agenda 111. It was funded from the GIF, money, the ABFA, the capex part of the ABFA, which was ceded to GIF. That's what we're using for Agenda 111. It was dedicated. And so I don't know what they meant by doing something great because they changed the funding pattern, or the approach to funding free senior high school. I don't see anything.
But that considering
yes.
that when you cap Get Fund, civil society, a lot of the stakeholders
yes.
in the sector opposed the capping.
Yes.
You insisted that that's what you wanted to do. Of course, it's your prerogative because you're government. Every government has its own agenda and policy. And they've come and listened to that cry and uncapped it and freed more than 4 billion CDs that then dedicated purposely for free assistance. That is responding to popular demand, which is what Ghanaians wanted.
But what was wrong with the capping? Were we not funding free senior high school?
But we know the challenges that you had.
Were we not supplying textbooks to students?
That is entirely not the case.
Were we not building
for more than 3 years, textbooks for the new curriculum were not supplied to the schools.
Well, I cannot speak detail on this.
Because you mentioned it.
No,
feeding was a challenge. Classroom infrastructure.
Feeding was not a challenge.
Oh, we did an investigation last year. After this, we were in the schools. Feeding was
investigation. You can prove to me how feeding was a challenge.
Was a huge challenge. Went to the schools. Feeding was a significant challenge. Yes. Accommodation was a huge. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Charles. Charles came out with huge evidence to back this.
But I can tell you.
Isn't that why I guess the call was to say on cap you have more money there to solve the problem?
We will live to see whether the uncapping will solve these problems, if at all they existed. Because merely uncapping doesn't solve the problem. You have to now show to me that the money you are getting from the uncapping is more, by far, than the money we were dedicating to funding free senior high school from the oil proceeds that Ghana got. If you cannot prove that to me, then for me, you haven't done anything new.
Free SHS wasn't the only one that they allocated monies for. Yes. And I'm coming back to the original point that you made in the press conference. And you see on your screen here,
so you can go to the first
and so this is...
Yeah, this one. This is generally...
Underfunding goods and services.
This is generally on goods and services. Now, all the promises they have made, their priority programs like Jumaura, which they said in the budget, they've allocated 100 million Ghana cedis. 80 million of that is in goods and services. Nkoko, Nketekete, 100 million Ghana cedis. The entire 100 million is in goods and services. Then you come to the national coders, 100 million, 60 million of that is in goods and services. You come to National Apprenticeship Program, 300 million Ghana cedis, 260 million is in goods and services. Agri for Economic Transformation, 819 million cedis in goods and services. Right. But if you look at goods and services generally in appropriation, then you will understand that goods and services are underfunded. Underfunded to the extent that the goods and services from GOG, expenditure allocation, from IGF, retained IGF, from foreign loans and grants amount to 21 billion Ghana cedis. But in appropriation, in the fiscal framework, they put in only 6.9 billion Ghana cedis. And so goods and services generally...
So you're saying there's a gap there?
To the extent of 14 billion Ghana cedis.
What is budgeted and what was appropriated?
Yes. Between what they say they will spend across these priority programs and what they have put in the budget of 6.9 billion. So my issue is, how are you going to fund all these programs that you have made so much noise about when goods and services are underfunded to the tune of 14 billion Ghana cedis? So it's not going to be possible.
And you have the same concern. You have the same concern with
education, in particular.
Tuition for tertiary
has this. Yes, paragraph 374 of the budget, states that tuition for first-year students they've allocated 449 million. 375 says sanitary pads for students, 292 million Ghana cedis. Textbooks, 564 altogether 1.3 billion Ghana cedis. And yet you go to appropriation and you find only 800 million Ghana cedis. So why is the text not speaking to the appropriation?
But you've been finance minister before.
That is why I'm able to know this.
But isn't this curable with mid-year budget review?
Oh, but you have opportunity to present a budget for the whole year.
Yes. And
you underfunded it, expecting that
but you are implementing this budget for a year.
Let me tell you what happens in mid-year.
Tell me. Sometimes you come and ask for more money.
Mid-year, no. It is only when you are doing supplementary budget.
Yes, you can do supplementary budget.
More money. And you ask for more money when you know that additional revenue is coming that you didn't know of.
Yes, but that is exactly what I guess is happening here.
But that is not going to be possible. I'll tell you
how do you know that?
If you look at revenue projection, we had a nominal growth in revenue in 2024 by about 8 billion Ghana cedis. They are projecting 38 billion Ghana cedis, moving from 8 billion to 38 billion. And the 38 billion Ghana cedis is coming from about 4 areas. You can go further down, and I'll show you the areas where they are coming from.
Is it this?
Yes. Look at the 4 areas: personal income tax, companies, growth and sustainability levy, and VAT. The difference there shows where they are expecting the growth to come from. But the revenue measures are weak.
Why do you say that?
They are mostly compliance measures. And I don't see how compliance measures can deliver you 30 billion.
So if it's not compliance measures, what else could deliver this?
There are other measures you can put in place. For example, they don't want to introduce new taxes.
But they introduced one on the mining sector, the mining giants.
They don't want to introduce new taxes. Yet they have introduced some taxes which people don't know about.
Yeah, because the incidence of that tax is not on the ordinary person.
No. The growth and sustainability levy, they are hoping to get 4.5 billion Ghana cedis from that.
Yeah.
We got just 821 million.
Yes.
Why? Because they've increased it by 200%.
True.
The same minister has been talking about the extractive sector leading our growth. So why do you want to tax the sector that is leading your growth?
But why shouldn't
to the extent that you increase taxes on that sector by about 200%.
But the extractive sector is pretty broad. There's also the oil and gas sector that hasn't been touched.
Yeah, but if you
there's a mining sector because of the windfall. World prices of gold have gone up. They're making windfall. They should pay part of that.
The contract
it's a fair share of
with
that.
them, the mineral contracts we sign with
stability clauses.
Yes, but also they have provisions on how you capture windfall through the additional oil entitlement, for example. It is there in the contract.
But they were consulted.
If you want to get more money from the companies, sit down and negotiate the mineral agreements which you negotiated with them.
But you're crying more than the bereaved.
No, but
the companies have not complained.
They have. They have written to my committee, the finance committee.
They have?
Yes.
But they were consulted.
They want to come and meet the finance committee on Wednesday because they have issues with that.
In this particular handle?
Issue. Yes. They are coming on Wednesday to meet our committee to discuss their concerns about this. Right. And I'm saying that apart from this, there are other industries that are affected by that very tax, the growth and sustainability levy, because they have also extended the period. The sunset clause was removed and extended to 2028.
Yeah.
And so if you want to know all those companies that are affected, you can see that from the bill. And I have them here. Banks are going to be affected. They are already charged 5%. Now they have to pay it until 2028. It was supposed to end this year. You have insurance companies, you have telecommunication companies, you have breweries, you have bulk oil companies, oil marketing companies, and a host of companies.
But this jump, he was clear in the budget, was targeted at the mining sector.
And oil companies. But I'm saying that...
Not oil companies, this is mining.
Yeah, mining covers both those doing solid minerals and oil. You can see that from the law. That's category B. Refers to mining companies and upstream oil and gas companies.
The way he put it, and we need to clarify this, that this particular intervention, this handle, is going to affect, because he was clear about the windfall, it's going to affect the mining sector, not the oil and gas sector.
The law has 3 categories of companies that are affected by this levy. Category A is what I was listing to you: banks, insurance companies, non-bank financial institutions, oil marketing companies, bulk oil. There are a host of about 15 different industries. Then category B is mining companies and upstream oil and gas companies. Because you think ordinarily, you know, oil and gas is not mining. But no, it is mining.
No, it is. I'm just talking about the way he put it. Just for clarity. Consequently, we are proposing to increase the growth and sustainability levy from 1% on the gross production of mining companies to 3% to enable the nation to have its fair share of windfall from increase in gold prices.
Yes. So but the law does not isolate.
Gold prices.
The law does not isolate mining companies unless he wants to say that he is increasing it from 1% to 3% for category B companies that are doing solid mineral mining.
And that is how I read. That's how I read that paragraph in the budget.
I have seen the bill that he has brought to Parliament, and it is affecting category B companies, which indicates that it will affect both
oil and
gas, and then those doing solid mineral mining. But the point I'm trying to make is that we may have increased the levy from 1% to 3% for mining companies, but by extending the sunset clause, all other companies will be affected. All other companies will be affected until 2028, because this levy should have ended this year. So by extending it to 2028, now you have banks that are going to be affected, you have non-financial banking institutions that are going to be affected, you have breweries that are to be affected, and you have oil marketing companies that are to be affected. And so, as far as taxes are concerned, yes, he has scrapped some taxes, but there are other taxes that are going to affect companies, and to the extent that they'll be passed on to, you know, consumers or customers. It's just like giving something to me with your right hand and then using your left hand to take it back.
But that tax hasn't gone up. It's just a case of extending
they will not have paying the tax next year, and the year after, they will not be paying it because it will have ended here, this year. So what do you say about that? It's the same as the import duty levy, where the minister promised, the party promised, NDC promised they were going to abolish it. And rather, they have extended the sunset clause for that one. It means that they've deceived the Ghanaian people. And so back to the table I was showing you, it is not only the education sector which is underfunded. I would like to show you the agri sector as well, which is underfunded. It's up there, if you can go further up. Go further up. No.
This one?
No, it's a table, up there. Further up, please.
Okay, let's go back to, I think, at the beginning.
Okay. Yes, this is the one. Agri priority initiatives underfunded. So in paragraph 390 of the budget, he lists the various programs under the agri priority initiatives. Feed Ghana program, Ghana Grains Development, Vegetable Development, cocoa.
They give them 1.5 billion.
He said 1.5 billion. You go into appropriation and it's only 924 million.
But before they identify how they cure this.
How do they cure it?
Supplementary.
Supplementary is based on getting new revenue.
But that's my point.
Is there the new revenue? The uncertainty about new revenue?
But that's my point. He is anticipating that in the course of the year as you implement, other sources of revenue may come in, and you have to go back to do a supplementary budget.
Year. If you are coming to do
but
a
finance
budget,
ministers in the past have used that to cure.
If you are
this. They would definitely have seen this.
If you are coming to do a budget, you have all the opportunity to budget for the whole year. And you are saying that and you are saying that you will use supplementary budget to cure it. What if you don't get the new revenue? That will warrant.
But I'm saying that
what happens?
Finance ministers like yourselves in the past have used the supplementary budget to address stuff like this. So this isn't new, isn't it?
No, to the extent you don't underfund a project expecting to fully fund it through supplementary budget when you don't know whether you will get new revenue or not. You don't do that. So this is deceptive. They do not plan to fulfill their promises to the people of Ghana. Otherwise, why will you underfund the promises? And then we can look at the big push, which has to do with CAPEX. Again, the party, NDC party, promised to do a $10 billion big push. Average, this will give you $2.5 billion a year for the 4 years of President Mohammed's tenure. In your first year, you budgeted in appropriation 13.8 billion. When has 13.8 billion become $2.5 billion? $2.5 billion will give you 40 billion Ghana cedis.
So you say there's a funding gap
of... also underfunded. To the tune of 26 billion, unless he wants to tell me.
But you don't, fix the big push in the first year.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Unless he wants to tell me that in the second year, they'll be doing $3 billion.
But they have 4 years.
But $3 billion for big push alone, do you know what it means?
No, but they have 4 years to implement the big push agenda.
And so you now have the rest of the 3 years.
And in the first year alone...
Yeah, first year alone is now up to $1 billion.
Yes, just the first year. You start slow.
And you are saying that the remaining 3 years, they will do $9.2 billion.
That's impossible.
How possible is it? If it is possible, they would have done that. Because they actually have more opportunity to even spend more this year. Do you know what appropriation is in total?
How much?
We did 250 billion. They are seeking to do 290 billion. The minister is projecting to get a nominal growth in revenue of about 38 billion Ghana cedis. So they have the money. Why are they underfunding their priority projects? So it's easy to promise, but when it comes to delivery, it's a different thing altogether. So, Evans, you can interrogate the data yourself.
The implementation, you have some of the interventions are 4-year programs.
Yes.
They never said, for example, that a big push is going to be implemented in 1 year.
What I'm trying to do is to alert you.
And the other key interventions, even the agri sector, never said that they're going to implement all this in 1 year.
I'm trying to alert you to something. The inconsistency in the budget itself. That questions the credibility, because you cannot go into the text of the budget and say you allocate 1.5 billion towards this program, and then you look at appropriation and it's 924. That is my issue. They have 4-year tenure, they can do more next year, but I'm saying that when you take the budget and you go into the text of the budget, the minister is talking about 1.5 billion, but you go to the appendices and then you see 924 million. How come the text is not speaking to the appendices? Because they think that people usually don't pay attention to the appendices. But that is the meat of the budget.
But that's very obvious.
So for professionals like us, we look at the appendices. Otherwise, you, a journalist who hasn't been involved in this.
Adam, everybody knows that in a budget, and my research team will pick this up very easily, that what you allocate, it's actually, there's a difference between what is allocated and what is actually disbursed, and then what is appropriated.
No, you are getting it wrong. When you say in the text of the budget that you have allocated 1.5, it means that if you go to the expenditure allocation,
it must match.
It must
match. I mean, but you also know, even where it matches, in the actual disbursement, often not everything that has been appropriated go to the agencies.
No, but that is beside the point.
I get it.
When it comes to disbursement.
I get it.
But your budget has to be credible, first of all. And this questions the credibility of the budget. And it's not only about the agricultural priority initiatives. I've shown you education. I've shown you total goods and services, under which all your promises, will rely on.
So, you talk about credibility.
Yes.
There are additional elements that I heard you question about the budget, for example. For example, the growth rate. You say they had deliberately understated it so that they can meet it and
brag. I mean, why not? Because if we had a nominal growth in revenue of about 8 billion Ghana cedis and we delivered a growth rate of 5.7, you are talking about 38 billion Ghana cedis, and you want to deliver just 4% growth.
So
after you have taken over a strong recovery in terms of the real sector of the economy.
So what should it be in your estimation? You've just left there.
Well, I haven't seen how they came by the 4%.
I mean, keeping them honest. When you went to the
I haven't
IMF,
seen how they came by.
When you went to the IMF,
I want to know how they arrived.
When you went to the IMF last year, the IMF document said in there that the projection for 2025 was 4.4%. And this is a document that you prepare with the IMF. So they are within that ballpark area.
No.
So it's basically your own document.
The IMF said the 2023 target of 1.5%. We grew above that. We did 3.1%.
Yeah.
2024 was set at 3.1%, later revised to 4%. We did 5.7%, isn't it? Because when you are doing fiscal consolidation, growth suffers. And that is why the IMF set those targets. But I'm saying that the economy has demonstrated that the recovery has been swift and has been strong. So based on that foundation, we expected the performance to be better.
I mean, this IMF report I'm talking about is the third one.
Yes.
In that document, under your watch, you projected 4.4. This government comes in and says 4. So it's, in essence...
No, this is the point.
Taken from your own playbook.
No, even with the IMF...
And that you did together with the IMF in putting and pegging the growth.
Even with the IMF, targets have been revised. That's why I told you. This 2024 target was 3.1%, set with the IMF. But looking at the way 2023 performed, where we grew at 3.1% instead of 1.5%, we revised it to 4%. And we even did better. So I am saying that they shouldn't wait until, IMF come to say, let's revise it. We have a foundation.
I guess the point of it is reasonable within the projections that you agree with the IMF before you left office.
But because,
and what they had done. If you go to 2024, the projection was 2.8. You end up doing 5.7.
No, 2024 was 3.1%.
Yes.
Maybe you are holding an old document.
So this is the projected growth rate?
Yes, later revised to 4%.
And this is the Ministry of Finance and Statistical Service?
Yeah, I'm sure you are referring to an old document. Every time there are new developments.
And this was updated as of?
It was updated in mid-year budget from 3.1%.
But you ended up at 5.7.
5.7.
Yes.
So I'm saying that because we defied all the projection and ended the year with 5.7, the projection for this year could not have been 4.4%. You understand that? It would have been revised by now. And that is what we expected them to do. But they tried to keep it lower. And I've asked two questions. If you are projecting a revenue growth nominally of 38 billion, why are you projecting 4% growth? When a nominal growth in revenue of about 8 billion could deliver 5.7% growth? That's the first question. The second question, even with the 5.7%, they said we criminally mismanage the economy. So how can a reset economy be delivering 4% when a criminally mismanaged economy delivered 5.7%? I'm asking you.
No, I'm not a finance minister.
Tell me. So these are the questions they have to answer. Right. But the real issue we also need to talk about is the manipulation of the data. President Mahama, since he won...
Which data?
The fiscal data.
Which one exactly?
I'm talking about the fiscal deficit, the overall balance and the primary balance, which they manipulated to make us look bad. As if, yes, this one, as if the Ghanaian economy that they took over from us was so bad.
Which aspects precisely?
So you have, for example, overall balance on commitment at deficit 7.6%. That is manipulated. Primary balance on commitment, deficit 3.6% is manipulated.
When you say manipulated, what do you mean?
Yes. And so to arrive at this, we go to the next page. This is what we've negotiated with the fund on how to determine the primary balance. And the primary balance is the anchor of the IMF program. You miss it, you breach the program. It's the anchor. So these guys wanted us to breach the program. And so they changed the methodology for deriving the primary fiscal balance. As a result of which they are a subject of audit by the IMF as I speak to you. The primary balance is what? Cumulative from the beginning of the fiscal year. They have gone to bring arrears of multi-years, some of them dating back to 2012, and not from the beginning of the fiscal year 2024. You add, according to the definition here, you add arrears payable to statutory funds, and then arrears payable to IPPs and fuel suppliers. That is what gives you the primary balance in terms of arrears that you need to use in the fiscal framework. Let's go to the next page. This is the data from the ministry itself. It's in the budget. And you will see outstanding IPCs up there, invoice. And the other side, you have outstanding BTAs. The BTAs are those that have been processed into what we call gift mix.
Yeah.
And they've been verified, they've been vetted, they've been audited, they've gone to gift mix. Under that, MDA's total is 8.5 billion. The statutory funds is 923 million. IPP payments is 923, and gift transfers is 382. If you add all this, it gives you 18.2 billion.
Yes.
Now, the 18.2 billion, let's go up again, and I'll show you in the table where it is.
You mean this?
The 18.2 billion is here, of which change in payables build-up reported in gift mix.
As at the time that these were being cleared, there's money there to pay for these.
Yes, I'm going to explain to you. So you have 18.2 billion there, gift mix. Now, this 18.2 billion is already reflected in the expenditure lines, compensation, goods and services. And so there is nothing from that line that we should put into the fiscal framework.
Now, the finance minister...
I'm explaining to you. Let me explain.
Yeah, okay.
So go back to the table. Go back to the table. So if you want to determine the fiscal balances, this is where you bring the arrears, other outstanding expenditure claims. Have you seen the 18.2 billion there?
Yeah.
It's not there because it reflected in other expenditure lines. Rather, they created this 49 billion, which is a stock of arrears, some of them dating back to 2012. And the way to treat it is that every year you take part of it through what we call arrears clearance plan and clear it. For example, this year, 2025, they said they are going to clear 13 billion Ghana cedis of it. So every year, part of the stock accumulated over several years is cleared. And so it has no business being in the fiscal framework. And that is what they have brought in to influence the fiscal balances, arriving at overall balance on commitment of deficit 7.6 and primary balance on commitment of deficit 3.6.
The finance minister...
If you did not have these 49 billion, this is what you would have gotten.
Yeah.
On the right side.
The finance minister,
yes,
when it was on the show, this 18.2,
yes,
he says, at the Controller Accountant General's end, certificates have been presented. You cleared it to go, everything, but you didn't have money to make good on those.
This is a practice. Every year...
You consider?
No, I'm coming. Every year, you have areas that you clear and areas you build up for the year, for the specific year. And therefore, when you have done that, the areas built up, which hasn't been cleared, is reflected in the expenditure lines and waiting for cash to extinguish them from the gift mix. And usually, in the following year, you budget for it.
So as at the time you're doing, you didn't have the cash to clear them?
Yes, but you register it in your fiscal framework, which means there are claims you cannot avoid. And so you budget for it for the next year, and then you clear it when cash is made available.
But you didn't know, you didn't know how you're going to get the cash, and yet you had
every
passed
year
them
it
to
happens.
go.
How do we get cash? From revenue. We also do financing through treasury bills.
But the revenue you don't know will be available.
But we also do financing.
You know, I'm asking this question because of the principle you established.
Yes.
Around their flagship interventions that you say appropriation did not match the budget allocations. And you said, and I'm making a point, you can come back and do supplementary.
Yes.
And he said, but you don't know your revenue. You don't know other revenue that's going to come. Isn't the same principle in this case?
This arrears is reflected already in the expenditure line, leading to the deficit that you have reported. And that deficit has to be financed. How do you finance the deficit? We borrow to finance the deficit through treasury bills. We get grants, sometimes which are not budgeted for, and you use it to clear all.
So government can also do same to bridge the gap between...
The 49 billion...
I'm talking about the previous case you mentioned.
No, you're going back there.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it's possible, but that is when you get the revenue. But when you are not certain you'll get the revenue, how do you underfund your budget?
A few quick things.
So I'm saying that if you didn't have 49 billion, your overall balance would have been deficit 3.4%, which is better than the IMF target of 4.2%. And your primary balance would have been surplus 0.6%, better than the IMF target of 0.5%. Ghana will never have breached. But because they want us to breach, they manipulated the data to arrive at higher fiscal balances. And now, Ghana is already suffering as a result of what they did. For political advantage, they have caused financial loss to the state.
How?
How? Our sovereign spreads today are in the 700 basis points. When 3 months ago, they were around 500 basis points and even going further down. Talk about the interest on our international bonds. Yeah. Bloomberg also reported the very day the budget was presented that our dollar bond due 2035 lost value by 1.8%. And our papers maturing in 2029 also lost value by 1%. This is financial loss to the state. And Bloomberg even went further to say it is because they have reported that we have missed our target on primary balance, which they know is the anchor of our IMF program. And so why will you deliberately create a story, a bad narrative for your economy through manipulation of data to cause this financial loss to the state?
The arrears that
and now, as I talk
the 49 billion,
yes,
you say it is arrears accumulated, not only in the last 8 years, but
and
some include 2012.
I'm
curious.
Yes.
How much of that is down to what you accumulated in your time?
In fact, let me tell you that as of 2022, when we were entering the IMF program, they had done a study, they vetted the figures, they audited them, and came out with a consolidated 47 billion Ghana cedis.
In 2022?
2022. So entering 2023, when the IMF program, they had ring-fenced all the areas they evaluated and audited, amounting to 47 billion. And therefore, they negotiated an arrears clearance plan with the IMF, that every year, the government will clear this amount of the arrears. Now, I am surprised that the minister has brought 49 billion from several years, which means that some of what you have in the 49 might have been captured already in the 47 billion. And so there is a case of double counting for most of them. This is why he himself said in the budget that he is now going to audit the data. But my question is, why will you use data to arrive at fiscal balances and create problems for your country when you have not yet audited that data?
You made the point. Because of time, and there are a few additional points.
That data,
there are few additional points
unaudited data
you made
to do your fiscals. And you came and told the whole world that
the few additional points you made at the press conference that I found interesting. You said that
before even your question.
No.
You know that we are now talking about waivers.
We'll come to that. I mean, because of time. I'll return to that.
This is important.
What waivers?
Because they are now asking for waivers from the IMF. That IMF should waive some of the conditions that they have created. They are self-inflicted.
I mean, to be fair to the NDC,
to waive them.
To be fair to the NDC, in their manifesto, they had said that they were engaged the IMF.
No, this is different from waivers. If you are asking for waivers, you are saying that you still want the IMF to do the review, but they should give you a waiver on some of the conditions. They should not hold you responsible. They should give you a waiver.
Yeah, but that's the same as what they said they will do.
No.
As in they will engage, try and renegotiate better terms.
As for the engagement, they've done it.
Yes.
And I don't think you are speaking for them.
I'm just asking questions based on what they had articulated in the past.
They have negotiated. They have talked to the IMF. The IMF have told them for certain things, we can't go anywhere with them. Now, the waivers they are asking for is because they want the IMF money. Because in this very budget, financing, budget support, they budgeted to receive some $120 million from the IMF. And the IMF program is tied to other programs. The World Bank, they are expecting $600 million, which is tied to the IMF program. The negotiation we did with our external bondholders, as a result of which we got reliefs. Debt cancellation of $4 billion, debt service relief of $7.5 billion is tied to the IMF program. Now that they have created a problem and they have seen the problem they are creating for themselves, they are asking for waivers.
Let's go to some of the quick things that you touched on. You said at your press conference that public sector hiring freeze.
Yeah.
Where did you get that? Because I was checking the fully published budget. I didn't find it in the page that you referenced, 478. It's not on the...
Then maybe you have a different version.
No, it's on the website.
Well, I have
website of the finance.
I have the
Ministry.
document they shared with us in Parliament.
And it's not there. In fact, what is there is one consistent on the finance ministry's website.
No, the document they shared in Parliament.
Well, I'm referring to what they published, the full one on their website, which I downloaded
you think
before I
they
came.
have changed the one online?
So you're accusing the finance ministry
Yes.
of changing the document that they have presented.
See what you are talking about.
So they say here, it says two points. One, consistent with our fiscal consolidation agenda, government will rationalize public sector payroll through headcount and biometric registration, among others. And then II, and this is all under paragraph 478, heads of services and public institutions are to undertake internal restructuring to place staff in understaffed areas and undertake training and skill and upskill. They never mention freeze.
We are in this together. You know that. Do I have to mention freeze before you know? What is that for? The first one you read.
That consistent with our fiscal consolidation agenda, government will rationalize public sector payroll through head counts.
What does that mean?
And biometric registration.
What does that mean?
Head counts and
biometric registration. Every worker on the payroll of the controller and accountant.
It is not a hiring freeze.
I'm coming. This is political language.
Head counts.
This is political language. It is for purposes of a net freeze, even if they haven't stated it here. Because every worker on the payroll of the controller and accountant general already has biometric.
You are claiming the powers of clairvoyance.
Yeah, they already have biometric.
But the text is very clear.
Even,
head counts.
No. Even I am letting
and
you understand what this means. I'm a former finance minister. I know what I'm talking about.
I know that. I know that.
And I know the protocols.
So you're saying
that govern that public sector recruitment.
But if they're going to head count and biometric, how does that equate to net freeze?
Because the net freeze...
Or hiring freeze.
The net freeze means that it's only replacement they can do.
Yes.
Replacement they can do. And so if you do that head count, biometric, they want to know what vacancy is left for replacement. That amounts to net freeze.
So you want to do a proper audit so you know who you are paying.
No. That is the net freeze, and that's the intention behind this.
That's my point. You're reading meanings into the text.
Because I understand it.
On the face of it.
I understand the language. That's the language of the finance ministry, and I understand it. So I don't know what you want to say.
Another key thing that you mentioned, which, by the way, was in the budget, was that the ECG, electricity prices will be adjusted.
Yes.
In fact, the finance made a point, which you touched on, which you said were betting us.
And what do you say about that?
But that's something. But that's something that you agree with the IMF.
Oh.
Before you left.
No.
You did. I mean, in the IMF third review, PRLC will continue to implement quarterly tariff adjustment consistent with the 2022-2025 electricity and water major tariff review. And this is what they are implementing.
I want to tell you that the quarterly tariff adjustment has existed over a decade, over 2 decades of our management of the energy.
That's true, except that it wasn't implemented a lot of time. The quarterly? For a long time, they did.
It's been implemented throughout. And
under the IMF is when you return to it religiously.
No, I was a member of PURC. I was on the board of PURC during Kufuor's era.
That's true.
We were doing quarterly tariff adjustment, and the formula is public, it's published.
But Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam, before the IMF program recently,
when you ask me
PURC were not implementing the quarterly adjustment tariff. You know this.
That is not true. That is not true. You need to go to PURC and get the data.
Because if they
the reason the IMF program insisted on that was that they thought the formula we were using was really not reflective of what should go into the quarterly adjustment. For example, we have CPI, which is inflation, exchange rate, and then also the generation mix of thermal to hydro, right? That is the variable that is always being challenged. And the IMF thought that that is being used to underestimate the quarterly adjustment. And so they want a formula that they can always vet. And the formula has changed over time. Even as I speak to you, the IMF is providing the government technical assistance, technical support to review the formula, right? But it's always been there. This time, what is happening is that the government has announced an increase in gas price. Gas price. What does that mean? Gas is the main component, the main input gas for power generation. And to the extent that gas price has increased, and this is indigenous gas that we produce in Ghana, we are increasing the price. When the gas that we bring in from Nigeria, they haven't increased the price. And by increasing the gas price, what does it tell you? It will reflect in the tariffs. That is why we're saying that electricity tariffs will increase. And we expect it to happen. Unless the government is underestimating the tariffs, in spite of the fact that they have increased the price of natural gas, indigenous natural gas.
Tomorrow, the debate starts.
Yes.
You'll definitely have your say. We're not even calling it debate anymore. Let's say commentary because of the change in the standing
Yes.
all this.
Yes.
In the end, this time there will not be a vote on the budget, will it? No. There will not be a vote on it.
There will be a vote on the budget.
There will be.
It's just the statement that we are to make comment on and not to...
My question is, you support the budget?
Well, we have challenges with aspects of the budget. I mean, as I've indicated to you, it is not delivering the jobs that they are promising. Look at the Women Development Bank, for example, allocation of 51 million Ghana cedis to it, when the minimum capital requirement for establishing universal banks is 400 million. In the case of development banks, which they actually want to do, it ranges between 300 million Ghana cedis for guarantee development finance institutions to about 1.2 billion Ghana cedis. And you've allocated just 51 million Ghana cedis. If you want to do a rural bank or a community bank,
so you support the budget?
Let the Ghanaian people know. But you cannot promise a women development bank.
When it comes to the vote,
you make allocation for the establishment.
When it comes to the vote, would you vote for it?
Community bank instead of a women development bank.
Would you vote for it?
The 24-hour economy is not going to deliver the jobs. There is no program in the budget on 24-hour economy, and so there is no allocation.
So will you vote for it?
For 24-hour economy.
Will you vote for the budget?
So we will discuss as a caucus, and we will take a decision on the budget.
You don't know yet?
But as it is now, the budget is not credible.
So you won't vote for it?
I've shown you different reasons why the credibility of the budget is in question.
Okay, but you don't know yet what the decision will be from the minority caucus, whether you are voting for it.
We haven't gotten to voting yet. We will debate, and then we will see the line of the debate. We will also consult our
Since you're here, this is not related to the budget.
Our constituencies, and then we will get the direction on.
That's a very political answer, but you know it's okay. But final question to you. Since you're here, Ken Ofori-Atta, he wrote a letter last week to his friends. I'm pretty sure you're one of his friends. And he's been declared wanted. You work with him. He was your boss. A lot of the accusations against him, and I've read one, including the tax refund thing, was based on the work he did in the finance ministry. I wonder how you reflect. What are your reflections on what has happened?
I don't want to discuss Ken Ofori-Atta on this program. No, never. Why should I? Why should I?
Not him, but,
it's
the
about him.
OSP going after him.
It's about him, and I don't want to discuss
and the accusations against him.
No, there's no way I'm going to discuss Ken Ofori-Atta on a public platform like this. No.
He's been treated fairly?
I'm not going to discuss Ken Ofori-Atta, but I know that Ken is capable of defending himself, and he will defend himself in the right court.
You spoken to him recently? You spoken to him recently? Have you spoken to him recently?
No, I'm not going to discuss what is happening between Ken and myself. Evans, why should I?
Okay.
Ken
Mohammed Amin Adam.
Boss, he did his best for this country, and one day he'll be vindicated.
Okay. I'm grateful.
It's my pleasure. Yeah.